It is Reaction Monday here on Jocks. This is Three-Man Front. Pat Landrum, Conrad Molly with you until 2 o'clock. A lot of action over the weekend. Second scrimmage is wrapping up around the Southeastern Conference, including the Alabama Crimson Tide on Saturday. Joining us on the Higginbotham Hotline from Bama 247, Alex Scarborough joins us now. Alex, I hope you're doing well. And a lot of news came out of this weekend, unfortunately for Alabama faithful, not so good news about the running back one. What is the very latest that you can tell us about Jam Miller?
Yeah, he's dealing with an upper body injury that's going to knock him out for at least the first game against Florida State. Would not surprise me if it's a little bit longer than that, but it's not a season-ending type of deal or anything along those lines. But really unfortunate thing where during the scrimmage he got banged up. It didn't look that bad, didn't sound that bad, which is why Kalen DeBoer did not mention it in our post-scrimmage press conference. But when they looked at it and got further testing, they realized, hey, there's more to this, and we're going to have to have a procedure done and have to sit him down for a little while and get him back for hopefully the stretch run and getting him into SEC play. But you look at it as kind of an opportunity for those backs behind him, whether you're talking about Richard Young, Daniel Hill, Dre Washington. I think those are your three most likely candidates. But the onus is on them now to go into what I think will be a tricky road environment in Tallahassee here in a few weeks.
Alex, based on people that you've talked to, what was the expected workload for Jam Miller?
Oh, he was definitely going to be the number one tailback. I think he was going to take the majority of the carries. I do think the second and third backs were going to get run. Because look, the bottom line is Jam he's had a good camp. He had a good spring, but you're talking about a guy who's been in the program for a long time, who solid, dependable, but I don't think has necessarily shown star power or necessarily shown making explosive plays, which is something they really need at that running back position, especially now that Jalen Milroe is no longer the quarterback and can provide those types of runs. So I think they were probably, in any instance, going to get a guy like Richard Young, a guy like Daniel Hill, a guy like Dre Washington, those opportunities, especially early in the season, to see if they can provide a little bit of spark. Because as good as you feel about Ty Simpson, who, by the way, can run the football, and that receiver core with Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Isaiah Horton, you go down the line, you got to have balance in this league. You got to have balance when you go on the road to Georgia. So I think those other backs were going to get reps regardless, but there's no question that Jam was going to be the guy. He just does all the things at a really high level. And I think that's what I've said multiple times is it's not just the running ability. It's the fact that he's so dependable in terms of knowing the offense, pass protection, catching the football out of the backfield. He's just a really dependable guy who I think they're going to miss, especially I think people are underrating the fact that you're having to deal with this not just late in fall camp, but going into, I think, what's going to be an amped-up environment in Tallahassee and throwing guys into that equation, quarterback and running back, who haven't really had to go through that before.
You mentioned Ty Simpson and his deceptive ability to run the football. I was told on Saturday he had a couple of long runs during the scrimmage. Talk a little bit about Ty. He's not just a pocket passer. Granted, he's not Jalen Milroe, but I think he's going to fool some people being able to get out of the pocket, and he's going to make some positive yards.
Yeah, he's not a burner per se, but he's a guy who is not afraid to use his legs. There's a reason 247 Sports had him as a dual threat quarterback coming out of high school. He does like to run. If anything, actually, I think one of the biggest challenges for him this late in his career was trying to figure out how to stay put a little bit in the pocket and not have quite so much happy feet. When you look at some of his film from a year ago, 2 years ago, I think he bails a little bit early and relies on his arm instead of having a strong base. So you want to see him stand in the pocket, but also he's going to take advantage of that athleticism. He's a tough guy who's not going to be against fighting for yardage. So I think at the end of the day, you're looking at a guy who can run the football, but will be looking to run to throw the ball more than anything in terms of just buying time. You're right. He had a good run coming out of that scrimmage. He was actually really accurate in that scrimmage too. He only had one or two really incompletions, a couple of drops in there too, which I don't think you really count against him. So a guy who can do a little bit of everything. The question mark for him is not the athleticism. It's not the efficiency necessarily. It's one, take care of the football, because that's a question with every quarterback, but also, can you make explosive plays? That's the thing I go back to. I think Kalen DeBoer said it late in spring, might have been right before the scrimmage. He said, at the end of the day, we don't want a game manager at quarterback. We want a guy who can go out and make football plays and make explosive plays. So I think that's one of the boxes that we need to see Ty check, whether that's him doing it with his feet, whether it's putting the ball in the air and letting Ryan Williams go run up underneath it.
And Alex, he's got to have that offensive line protecting him. Based on what you thought about the offensive line 2 weeks ago and now after 2 scrimmages and all the reports from practice, what are your thoughts heading into the season?
Yeah, maybe some inconsistencies there and pre-snap stuff that they've got to get cleaned up. Sort of some of that is to be expected, I think, because there's been a wrinkle, right, with Jaden Roberts being out. And even before he had the concussion, he kind of had a little bit of a competition on his hands. When you talk about Cam Dewberry and Geno Vandermark fighting for both of those guard spots. So there's a little bit of an influx there on the offensive line where it looks solid. Before that, where you really had one position you're battling for, now you got 2. I think it says more about the talent that Alabama's brought in, that they feel good about, both Geno, who played quite a bit off the bench last year, both at center and at guard, and then bringing Cam Dewberry in over from Texas A&M, had a really good work in the offseason, getting his body ready, a guy who NFL teams sort of have their eye on. I think it says more about what they have there as opposed to what they don't have. The question to me isn't how good the offensive line can be. I think it'd be really good. It's just how did it reach its ceiling? And I think sort of emblematic of all of that is Caden Proctor and what we know he can be as a left tackle versus what he shows consistently every single week. He can be a top 10 pick, but we need to see him stay healthy, and we need to see every week him bring it. And I think that really applies to the entire offensive line for Alabama.
Alex Scarborough joins us on the Higginbotham hotline from Bama 247, talking about Alabama wrapping up their second scrimmage over the weekend. Staying on the offensive side of the ball, you just mentioned the wide receiver core. All indications are they've had a very good camp, and Isaiah Horton is going to be someone that if the opponents don't realize he's a big receiver and you put all your attention towards Jeremy Bernard and, of course, Ryan Williams, all of a sudden Horton could give flashes of what the Tide fans saw a couple years back with a very deep wide receiver core. Just kind of go down the line there of what you expect from that group coming up in Tallahassee.
Yeah, they're loaded, especially at the top of the receiver room. We know what Ryan Williams is capable of. I think you want to see a little bit more in terms of consistency. The back half of the season, he sort of got worn down a little bit. And I think some of that was, look, it's a true freshman, but also a true freshman who skipped his senior year of high school. A lot of it was Jalen Milroe and the offense constricting, the passing game specifically. So can he consistently bring it every single week and be a guy who could be not just the face of Alabama, but one of the faces of college football? And then Jeremy Bernard, I think, is the most underrated player on the team, maybe. Parker Brailsford probably has a word to say in that argument, but just does everything at a really high level. But then you bring Isaiah Horton into it because he does have that size, like you referenced. I think he's 6'4", 6'5", gives you that length, but also has the speed to go over the top. I think he's going to be a massive threat. I think he's going to be a really good player, not just in his own right, but with the way he can unlock and take some of the pressure off of Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard as well. But there is depth there. You love what you hear about Rico Scott. Looks like the guy who's going to be the fourth receiver is probably one of the fastest guys, if not the fastest guy on the team. And then some really interesting pieces behind it, whether, Lotsier Brooks had a huge spring, really athletic. There are guys in this receiver room, and you're just waiting to see, can the quarterback unlock it? Because it wasn't working with Jalen. But I think the addition of Isaiah and the way the offense will change in Ty Simpson's hands has the potential for this Alabama wide receiver room to look drastically different than a year ago and be in the conversation to be one of the best receiver rooms in the country.
Speaking of difference, how much difference, Alex, have you been able to tell with Alabama's offense, maybe even Kalen DeBoer, since the arrival of Ryan Grubb?
Yeah, I think there's a quiet confidence that's there. A lot of it's the familiarity that those two have. They both feed off each other, and they both complement each other in really interesting ways because Grubb is just a super fiery guy. The more you learn about him, the more you understand, hey, I know why Nick Saban wanted to hire him, because they're in some ways cut from the same cloth. But Kalen is that big picture guy, presents a calmness, and I think they balance each other out. And you talk to people throughout their respective careers who have seen them together, and they're just like, it's special when the two of them are together. But even more than that, I think is just Look, continuity is kind of a thing that's been said over and over again, but more than that, it's like, hey, everybody knows what everybody's supposed to do at this point. This isn't a new offense anymore. And by the way, they upgraded at several key positions to where they just look at year two, and I think they know what all of this is capable of. I'm not sitting here saying it's going to look like Washington 2023 right out the gate, but when you talk about the depth at receiver, what they have potentially on the offensive line, and if you get that quarterback play, maybe you start to see the offense that Greg Byrne flew out to Seattle to go get when he hired Kalen DeBoer. The plan all along was to have Ryan Grubb as the OC, and the Seahawks sort of squandered that. But a year later, they get to try that again, and quiet confidence is the phrase I would use, because the quarterback is still a question mark. But if that box gets checked, I think the potential is there for this offense to make a huge leap from what we saw a year ago.
All right, let's talk on the other side of the ball, the defense. A lot of talk about the defensive line. Can it get enough pressure up front? The secondary, it looks solid. Just your take on what you have been able to see and the people you talk to about Kane Womack's group.
Yeah, solid, I think, might be underrating the secondary, because it's across the board. You look at the starters, Damani and Zabian at cornerback, two of the better corners in the country. I think Zabian is wildly underrated going into his sophomore year. He just carries himself like a pro and really made great strides as a true freshman last season. I think he's going to be really, really good. And then Keon Sabb and Bray Hubbard at safety. Bray stepped in for Keon when he got injured a year ago, played at a really high level. And we know what Keon can do in terms of being a playmaker, the maturity he has on the back end, but it's the depth that's really the difference. And that's the thing you started to hear more about in the spring and then carried it over into preseason camp. Just kept hearing Dijon Lee's name. Probably not a surprise for a 5-star, but a 5-star cornerback in a crowded room really continues to make a case for why you should get on the football field. And then Cam Calhoun, the transfer from Utah, played quite a bit there last year. I think he's going to be a guy they depend on off the bench as well. So the defense on the back end is really good. Linebacker, they got lucky. I think they'd even say that by getting Deontay Lawson and Justin Jefferson back when you didn't expect either one of those things to happen because of the draft and NCAA eligibility rules. Add in Nakai Hill-Green and you look solid. The question, to your point, is can you get to the quarterback? Because Kane Womack was having to use smoke and mirrors a year ago and trying to send numbers and holding his breath at the back end of the defense would hold up because there wasn't a lot of guys who could win one-on-one battles. LT Overton was the best guy at doing that. 39 pressures and only 2 sacks. One of those parts of that sentence is great. The other part, not so much.
Yeah.
So can he be a guy who kind of closes that gap? And can guys like Quay Russaw, maybe even a Noah Carter down the line, can you bring guys on the field, even if it's just third down packages, you can get to the quarterback? If you do that, I think this defense goes from good to great.
That is Alex Scarborough. You can follow all of his work there at Bama 247. Just an outstanding analyst in regards to what has transpired so far in fall camp, as we're less than 2 weeks away from kickoff at Doak Campbell. Always appreciate your time, Alex. Enjoy the next couple of days. I know practice is off, but there's still plenty of work to be done. We hope to catch up with you again very soon.
All right. Thanks, Wes.
Appreciate it. That's Alex Scarborough joining us on the Higginbotham Hotline. You deserve solutions that are built for you. Higginbotham is your one-source solution for insurance, financial, and HR services. Want to remind everybody about Artec Tractor in Jasper. They're having a sale right now on all their fluids and filters from now until the end of September. That's all oil filters and air filters, also engine oil and hydraulic oil. That's 15% off those items. Locally owned specialists in mowers and tractors, mower brands like Toro, Cub Cadet, Gravely, Bobcat, Spartan. I got on my Toro Zero turned on Saturday, got all my yard work done as we get ready for kickoff. Call Jeremy or Greg or go by and see them just north of Jasper on Highway 5 at Artec Tractor, or go to their website, artectractor.com. More three-man front on this Reaction Monday. We'll get to your phone calls, 1-800-239-WJOX, courtesy GMC text line 205-834-9450.